of what transpired during the session. So first off, I want to thank all of you for coming this morning. I want to thank all of you for being patient with the district. As you know, in your lives, both your personal and professional lives, this has been a remarkably challenging situation navigating through this crisis. So again, what I'm going to share with you definitely is not perfect, but we're trying to be, as a district, responsive to as many needs as possible throughout our community and across the grade span, from pre-K all the way through grade 12. So the way I'd like to do this is I just want to share some comments. I know I shared yesterday vis-a-vis email and also social media a screencast where I just had a few slides. It's just kind of an overview of what our district's remote learning plan is. And then I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have. And probably what we'll do, as we did during the last town hall, because of the number of people and so on, the chat feature, which is on the side right panel. If you look on your screen, if you're not familiar with Zoom, down in the lower part of the screen, there is an icon that says chat. If you go to that, that will open up your chat window and you can type in a question there. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to share my screen. And what I'm going to do is I am going to go to a presentation, the presentation that is in my screencast. And I'm just gonna, again, give an overview of where we are as a district with regard to remote learning. And that might give a little bit of insight into some of the decisions that have been made and might answer some of the questions that you might have. So again, the rationale of why exactly we're doing this kind of speaks to the closure that Governor Baker has put in place for all the schools. As you know, our initial closure was 3 weeks, and then late last week, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday of last week, he increased that closure to May 4th. And I think the reality is, not to be pessimistic, that we have to prepare for a distinct possibility that the closure is going to extend beyond May 4th. If you're like me and you watch the news and you see some of the updates and some of the speculation around the peak of the coronavirus, I think it is a distinct possibility that we could be going well beyond the May 4th. And I think we have to prepare for a reality that conceivably we close the school. This is the way we end the school year this year, doing something that's strictly based upon remote learning. I think keep in mind that our emphasis over these first 3 weeks has been to share resources with families, and the mindset being that we're going to work on reinforcement of skills and knowledge and practice and so on. But I think in looking at a closure that's substantially longer, we have to pivot a little bit. And yes, there still can be practice. There still can be a reinforcement of things that our kids have already learned. But I think we also have to move into a realm where we are providing instruction and providing services to our kids, and to some degree progress in the curriculum. However, I'm sure as you're all cognizant, there's going to be limitations of what we can do strictly online. The Mendon-Upton Regional School District was not created as a virtual school, and we are really doing this on the fly and thinking about systems and procedures and policies and practices as we're doing them. But I do want to say it doesn't mean that we do not try to provide new content, new lessons to our kids, but I think we also have to be cognizant that it's going to look different than it would in a typical year in the months of April, May, and June. So in this pivot, what we've done, like all other districts across the Commonwealth, is we've developed a remote learning plan. And we're intentionally using the terminology remote learning because that is the terminology that the state is using, and realize it looks very, very different in different communities. In Western Mass and some of the rural communities, it looks very different versus urban communities versus our community. However, what we're trying to do is we're trying to strike a balance here, and the balance being between some type of real-time face-to-face interaction between our teachers and their students, and then the whole asynchronous piece where students are learning and students are doing things on their own time. Keep in mind, the second balance would be between flexibility, and we were very cognizant that different households have different stressors. We're cognizant that we have parents that are working at home. We're cognizant that we have parents that are still essential employees and are leaving the house, and they may have caregivers looking after kids. We're cognizant that it looks very different for a student in the early elementary grades versus a high school student, and so on. But what we're trying to do in this plan is find that balance between flexibility, but with also having some type of structure for scheduling. We know that we have some kids that need that structure, and we also know that we have families that want that structure and want that planning piece as well. So it's very, very challenging to meet everybody's needs. And I say this in all sincerity and all humility. We realize that what we've put forward is not necessarily the perfect plan. And with that in mind, we know we have to adapt, and we conceivably will have to make changes on the fly. I do want to say that what we're saying is, because this represents moving forward with schooling in a formal way, engagement is not optional, okay? That I've gotten some feedback from our principals and also from some of our educators. There have been situations where some families and some students, there has not been a response to what has been put out. It generally is not a majority by any means. You know, it's a small minority. However, there has to be an accountability piece in proceeding with learning. Again, with that flexibility piece, we're looking at the accountability piece not necessarily being by attendance in 100% of all remote learning sessions or the face-to-face sessions, but rather in submission of student work on a satisfactory basis. So kind of talking about the submission of work and the grading piece that goes with that, we are going to be following the State Department of Education recommendation. And I believe that all, or if not all, the overwhelming majority of districts across the Commonwealth will be following the recommendation to use a credit, no credit type system for the submission of work. And we actually, as a leadership team, decided on a third designation where if a student made a good faith effort for work, however, it somehow did not meet an appropriate benchmark, a teacher could opt to designate it as resubmit for credit. The key thing is, again, no letter grades, A through F, no numeric grades, however, feedback from the teacher. As I just said, the expectation is for any assignment that's given, a rubric or some type of scoring criterion, a scoring sheet will be shared that details the quality that the student must complete to receive credit. So as I just said, the student accountability piece will be through the submission of work on a satisfactory basis. So the piece that we're looking at right now, after a lot of thought, is at the secondary level, that is at MISCO and at NIPMUC, for terms 3 and 4. All grades will be strictly on a pass-fail basis. And I believe term 3 was slated to end yesterday. So that's 3 weeks of term 3 work that necessarily was not mandated. So what we've decided to do is to extend term 3 an additional 2 weeks to April 17th. And again, term 3 will be pass-fail along with term 4. In the event that, say, we were to return at some point during term 4, we may revisit that. But I think because of the complexity of all of the implications around instruction, all of the implications around services, and so on, the most equitable solution for all of our students in looking at creating a broad-based policy is to go to this pass-fail system. I have received some feedback from some different stakeholders, from parents, from a couple of students regarding this, and particularly around the concern of students that, particularly juniors, that may be looking at college application process and so on. Again, I would say you need to realize that this is not just a Mendon-Upton decision. This is something that has been pretty universal across the board in the state of Massachusetts. This is something, quite frankly, that's also happening nationally. If you've been following what has happened in higher ed at the university level,
grades last night.
If I can interrupt, can you please check and to see if you have muted your sound? I appreciate it. But at the university level and in many colleges, they've gone strictly to a pass-fail basis as well for this semester. So this is something that's happening universally. I realize the difficulty behind it and so on, but we will be issuing further guidance with regard to, particularly at NIPMUC, with regard to things such as GPA and class rank and some of the implications there. At the elementary level, we've decided to proceed with the 3rd trimester using the standards-based report card as we typically would, featuring grades of either 2, which would be approaching the standard, 3, meeting the standard, in some cases NA for not assessed for each of the standards. And I'm fully cognizant that this is, too, a real challenge. Our elementary teachers work really, really hard. They're super committed. They take all of the standards that are in that standards-based report card, which drive their curriculum very, very seriously. I think we're going to have to look at that. We're going to have to recalibrate because, again, the virtual or the remote learning experience does not, it will not resemble the experience that our kids have, during a typical school year, again, face-to-face. So some other thoughts, again, in looking at concerns and things that have been brought to my attention, is I ask everybody, and I ask this again with respect and humility, is that please take a deep breath and do not become overwhelmed. And again, I think if you're like me and you've had a series of meetings vis-a-vis Zoom or any other teleconferencing, you see living through this crisis sometimes has really taken its toll and its strain on people. I can tell you that our commitment as a district is to provide a reasonable workload that is developmentally appropriate for our kids. I've asked our teachers to share out on Monday morning, by Monday morning at 9, kind of what the game plan for the week is. At the secondary level, it would be posting assignments and so on. But at the elementary level, because elementary teachers are teaching different subjects and so on, to map out what the courses are and some of the work and the resources and so on, so that parents can plan appropriately. And again, we're fully cognizant as far as the demands of what it would look like for a kindergartner and a first grader versus what it looks like for a kid in high school and everybody in between. As I said before, we will issue further guidance, particularly on assessment and grading. I know our co-principals at the high school, John Clements and Marianne Moran, have done a lot of work with that, and we've actually posted some on a website, which I'll share with you in just 1 minute. Again, I want to underscore about us adapting if we need to and being flexible if we need to. I think it's going to look different in every situation. I've asked our teachers to work very, very closely in their grade level teams at the elementary level, but also in interdisciplinary teams at the middle school and in departments at the high school, so that we have a degree of commonality in what we're doing, what we're sharing with our students, what we're sharing with families, and so on. And again, I talked about a website. If you go to MURSDremote.com, you can see some of the FAQs, again, some of the getting into the weeds of nitty-gritty about things like grading practices and how it's going to look, and implications for Power School and so on. Some of those questions, answers to those questions are there. But there's also, as we did before, a form, that a Google form that you can fill out if you have a particular question, and you can ask it then and there. I want to go back to what I talked about 2 weeks ago when I did this last town hall for families, and specifically what really guides our practice here. And it's really 3 of our district core values around first, family and community first, and really that whole social emotional piece, that first and foremost, we care about the well-being of our students, first and foremost. And kind of dovetailing off of that is the whole notion that relationships matter. We really, really care about all of our kids. We care about our families. We care about what you are going through and the stressors and so on that are happening in this moment. So the relationships are first and foremost. Do we take the curriculum and do we take teaching and learning seriously? Of course we do. And we want to progress with that. But we do that really secondarily to maintaining our relationships and maintaining the trust that our students and their families have with us. And then lastly, it's about supporting all learners. In the document, and I've had some questions about special education services and those students who need some specialized instruction. I would urge parents to reach out to if your child does have an IEP, to whoever is your child's case manager. I think there's a lot of implications with regard to what's written into IEPs in this moment and what is doable strictly in a virtual environment versus what's doable in our typical in our the typical school setting. I think there's some services that our special educators and support staff can deliver online, through video conferencing and so on. However, there's some that, quite frankly, we cannot. I think what we will be doing is we will be proceeding with team meetings. We will be having these conversations on a case-by-case basis. And if we need to, moving forward, once we return back to normal, provide additional services to meet the goals of the students' IEPs, we will do so as a district. So again, it is still about being flexible about the next step in our planning, but that is our intent in moving forward. So that is essentially, again, a very, very high-level overview of this is generally a high-level overview of what our game plan is moving forward. Again, if we need to adapt, if certain things by and large are not working, we'll change. We'll change on the fly. And again, I go back to the idea that the Mendon-Upton Regional School Districts is made up of 2,306 students and 311 educators. We're a bricks and mortar operation, but I give our educators, our administrators, our support staff a world of credit that they are working extremely hard to make this work, and we will continue hard to make this work. So what I'll do is I will go to the chat, and I will do my absolute best to answer the questions that are here, and I will answer everything that I can to the best of my ability. And if I can't, I'll let you know who could potentially answer this question. So the first question, am I assuming correctly that they'll be working through April vacation? No. Keep in mind that our school calendar is approved by the school committee, and at this time for the 2019-2020 school year, we still have Good Friday in the calendar and April vacation. It's my recommendation that we keep that intact, that those will not be virtual learning days. I've gotten feedback from many, many different stakeholders that we'd be well served by the break, and particularly with some concerns regarding screen time and really still not kind of following into a flow of a schedule. From Laura Beth, the weekly outline of assignments was extremely helpful. Thank you for retaining that aspect. It's beneficial for the kids to utilize it from their own time management skills. From a parent point of view, it is extremely helpful to have all that information in one location. I couldn't agree more, Laura Beth. And what we're doing is we're trying to standardize that, particularly across the elementary level, because again, our elementary teachers are teaching multiple subjects, and at the secondary level, having that information first thing Monday morning, we realize is helpful for planning purposes. Jennifer, good morning, Jennifer. The schedules we receive for our children include specialist blocks. Are the kids expected to complete 3 hours of ELA and math work a day and then also complete specialist work? I think you're going to find, Jennifer, that the specialist work is going to be super, super reasonable, and it's going to be more in the context of giving kids opportunities. For example, if I'm a PE teacher, I've seen some of the things that, for example, Mrs. Horn who is our PE teacher at Memorial, has asked kids to do with regard to, getting outdoors and exercising and so on. I've seen something, for example, that Mrs. Fowler, who's the art teacher at Memorial, has asked kids to find things in nature that have, artistic geometric shapes and so on. So I think you're going to find that what is being requested from the specialists really more falls into kind of an enrichment milieu. From Abby, is it possible to have the outline of the week by Sunday evening? That would be super helpful for parents that are still working. Some households like ours could have 2 essential employees. I think you're going to find, Abby, that again, we're asking by Monday morning. I think maybe we'll have some teachers that'll roll that out earlier than that. But I also want to be respectful to our teaching staff who, again, are looking to reinvent some of their lessons and recalibrate things and so on. And, let's just see how this plays out. I think by first thing Monday morning at this juncture is a reasonable request. From Mike Meliti, good morning, Mike. Joe, you need to count the grades from term 3. 90% of the term was completed before homeschooling began. It's too important for college admissions. Other districts, Uxbridge High School, for example, are counting grades from term 3, so it's not universal. Our juniors have worked too hard to get grades where they need for them to disregard them. It has a major impact on their future. For juniors, well, Mike, I did see your exchange with my other friend, Mike Rubrin, on Facebook. First off, it is not accurate. We weren't completed 90% of term 3. To the contrary, it was probably more like 67% of term 3. It is a very, very difficult decision. It really is. And I am very respectful, as I'm sure John and Marianne are at the high school, of students that have worked really, really hard. But we need to make a decision in looking at all students, and in all students, particularly during those last 3 weeks of term 3, not necessarily getting the support and the pieces that they needed during this first 3 weeks of school closure. So it is a very difficult decision, but it is, in my opinion, the right decision that the high school has made. And again, I respect Uxbridge tremendously. I've got a world of respect for Mike Rubrin, but the decision that we've made at Nipmuc, we feel is for the best. Would you please explain how will the students take the SAT this year? John or Marianne, would you mind unmuting and maybe kind of sharing some of the insight that you've received from College Board?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. This is Marianne. So, and Mike Rubin posted this up too. There's a ton of information on the College Board website that you can go to get information. Right now, they've canceled the May test, but they still have the June test as a possible option for students. So my guess is, to take it in June to start. And if for some reason that date gets canceled, College Board will be putting out further guidance for students and families.
Hey, Marianne, can you still stick around?
Sure.
The next question from Cormac is, how will students taking AP courses and honors, for that matter, get the proper weight added to their GPA using only pass-fail grades? This is particularly important for juniors who need that GPA for not only college admission, but also consideration for merit aid.
Sure. So pass-fail grades are not considered in GPA or class rank. They've never been considered. We have very few courses currently that are pass-fail, but it's been past practice that they're not included in there. So terms 1 and 2, we're working to include those numerical grades as students have them in class rank and GPA, but term 3 and 4 being pass-fail would not be included.
Super. Yeah, so essentially the long and short of it is terms 1 and 2 will be discrete from terms 3 and 4. And the decisions that we typically make around GPA and class rank and so on will be discretely using term 1 and term 2 from the 1920 school year. From Mrs. Krager, I'm concerned about the amount of screen time that will be expected of our elementary school students. My own child gets headaches easily from excessive screen use. Can you speak to screen time limits or expectations? Great question. That's why we're trying to be flexible in the schedule. You know, my wife said to me, and my wife has a ton of wisdom, I might add. She's sitting right across from me right now. And she says to me, my God, Joe, in some ways, this is like a snow day call. You know, you're going to have people that think you're brilliant, and you're going to have people who think you're the biggest moron on the planet. And that's why we're trying to be super, super flexible. I've heard from parents who've said to me, wow, we need more real FaceTime, face-to-face instruction for kids. And then I've heard the opposite of like, this is never going to work at the elementary level. And you're putting work on parents, and parents have to manage this, and so on. I think what we're going to have to do is, again, look at what we've put in the schedule and then recalibrate it if it's not working. So I don't know what your first name is, Mrs. Krager, so I'll be formal and I'll call you Mrs. Krager. I agree with you. And we have to look at what is reasonable screen time. And that's why the whole piece around the face-to-face sessions, we're not making them, we're not mandating them. We're not making those mandatory and so on. So I think we have to stay in close communication. We have to stay in close communication with our teachers and so on. And we have to do what works for our kids and what works for our families during this extraordinary time. Mike Rubin says SAT for May has been canceled. College Board will be sending guidance in June. Thank you so much, Mike. We appreciate that. Mojo family, you definitely get the award for the coolest Zoom name, Mojo family. Collegeboard.org has loads of information regarding SATs and AP testing. That's true. Thank you for sharing that. From Tara, what precautions have you taken in teachers and students using Zoom since there's been some hacks noted in the news? That's a great question, Tara. If you'll notice, and it's actually in the news this morning, Zoom has gone completely to a password protected system. I think part of the problem that you've seen with this quote unquote Zoom bombing has been when links have been put out there publicly. Realize what we've done is we've procured a district-wide Zoom account that all of our teachers are using. So the link should say mursd.zoom.com and then whatever. So our teachers will be posting it exclusively in private areas that only students and their families can access. And as of Monday, it's also going to be password protected. From Sophie, in addition to Mrs. O'Neill's question, what if your term 3 grades would have raised your GPA? Doesn't it going to a pass-fail system hurt those people? That's a really, really great question, Sophie. It really is. And it is really a challenging situation. And again, we're making some policy decisions based upon looking at the totality of all of the different circumstances for students and so on, not just looking at GPA, honors level students, and so on. And I guess with regard to, again, the sense of pressure or the sense of what about my college application process and so on, again, you're not alone. Again, NIPMUC students are not alone. We're all in this situation together, and there would be calibration. Okay, I don't know, John or Marianne, if you have anything to add to my thoughts on that, because I think that's very much kind of a philosophical issue.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dr. M. I would just say our students have been phenomenal throughout this, and this is one of the questions that's been on our mind the most as we try and find the right solution. And we have received emails that are polite, appropriate, advocating for all different points of view on this issue. But when it came down to it, in addition to all the things that you were bringing up, you know, with just about 2/3 of the term completed, we looked at the fact that not all kids have had a fair opportunity to improve their grades. They weren't expecting the term to be done at the 2/3 point. We recognize that some of our kids had been absent and missed assessments, midterms, or big test or projects that can't just be replicated at home. And so then you create an inequity where they can't make that work up. Just the sort of the reality of high school life is that the calendar tends to ramp up a bit as you get closer to the end of term. And so you have a lot of classes with end of term assessments, projects, presentations that haven't happened yet. That on top of the DESE recommendation that we go pass fail really played into this.
Thank you, John. What solutions are available for working parents of elementary school children who cannot walk away from their jobs to provide this level of support? The student schedules have them going from 9 to 1 each day. So that's a great question, Rebecca, and thank you for asking it. I think, again, that's where we go to the flexibility, where work and resources will be posted by our elementary teachers. I think we'll probably be looking at situations where some of the live sessions would be recorded and then posted. So again, we realize because of circumstances in homes and stressors and so on, in many cases, you're going to have some kids that will not be able to make those live face-to-face sessions. So I think we will be flexible, and we will have opportunities so that if a parent is locked in at home, or a caregiver is locked in at home between 9 and 1, they can access it. From Jen, is there a way teachers can update PowerSchool with assignments received but not graded? This way parents know what is done, maybe online? Oh, done. Done, and what is missing. Yeah, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're also, again, part of the FAQs, some kind of the weeds types things, is we're going to provide guidance that at the secondary level, we're going to have PowerSchool updates where assignments will be listed and there'll be designations about what's handed in. From Carrie, I know that you said term 3 and 4 for MISCO, Clough, and Memorial was pass-fail on report card. Is NIPMUC going to get regular grades for the third term as they were for the majority? I think that, again, is NIPMUC is going to be at the secondary level. So we're talking MISCO and NIPMUC is going to be pass-fail. Heather, what's the status of the principal search for Memorial Elementary? It is progressing really, really nicely. We have finalists intact, and we will be making an announcement very, very shortly. Again, from Mrs. Krager, will the 3 hours of learning encompass the teacher lessons and specials? Okay, so what Mrs. Krager is referring to is that in the commissioner's guidelines, it is creating an expectation that students roughly be working a half day, so roughly 3 hours. So that 3 hours would encompass both live FaceTime, but also asynchronous learning, to be very, very clear about that. What format would assignments come in? Would it be via email, Google Classroom, etc.? We're asking all of our teachers to post it to whatever format or platform that they use. So At the secondary level, by and large, it'll be Google Classroom, and at the elementary level, it would be Seesaw or Class Dojo. From Michelle Denise, good morning, Michelle. It looks like the schedules for MISCO and Nipmuc on each Friday, they have no assignments or prescribed online learning sessions. Is it possible for elementary to also use Fridays as a makeup type day for the work assigned during the week? This would give families, I think it's supposed to be more flexibility to move work around from their home schedules. That's a great point, Michelle. We might move to that. The feeling was initially that the elementary teachers kind of needed that extra time, again, because it is, elementary teachers are teaching more subjects and so on. You know, again, we may revisit that. Mike, thank you for your comment. Mike says, our third quarter was at a different place, so it was almost complete, more than 67%. So different church, similar few. Okay. Diane Duncan, how's my friend Diane Duncan doing? I miss you. First of all, getting info on Sunday night would be helpful in order to able to review with my student. Sure. My 7th grader has had a couple Zoom sessions to connect with teacher and classmates. I don't watch them diligently, but from what I've seen, it's more about connecting with and being taught. Moving forward, will teachers be teaching via video, either synchronized or specifically scheduled Zoom meetings or videos being made available to watch during their own timeline? I realize to date there's been a lot of review, but I'm hoping new content will continue to be taught. Hopefully you saw my presentation, Diane, but yes, that is the intent of moving to this new system, that we will be instructing new content. From Stephanie Kenny, will there be an opportunity to assess how this new way of scheduling and organizing work for a student after a week or 2 weeks to make sure this approach is working for the majority? Great point. I'm concerned with the prevalence of mental health issues nowadays, anxiety, depression. We are putting so much on our kids and our families that we may exacerbate these issues, and we may need to pivot or shift our approach. Steph, I could not agree more. So our game plan is within the next week, 2 weeks, we will put out surveys to all of our parents, probably at the secondary level to our students as well, and we will get feedback on how this is working. Again, I think your points are completely on point, and we will adapt as needed. From Audra, I would recommend blue light glasses to buy for your kids because they helped for using screens for prolonged periods. Again, thanks for the recommendation. Carrie, having assignments due Friday by 11 o'clock can be difficult for assignments that need parental support if those parents are still working full-time all week. Having a Sunday evening due date would be great. I think you're going to find, Carrie, that our teachers are going to be flexible with regard to assignments and due dates and so on. So I think everything is not going to be lockstep in when assignments are due. Scott, it would be very helpful to get high-level topics for each subject elementary level so parents could better support their students. This would be high level, not the specific plan for the week, okay? Regarding students in the SI program at the middle school level, how are these students expected to keep up with the material if they are not having consistent or regular conversations in Spanish with one Zoom session per week? I think I think you'll find in the middle school schedule, there is SI time built in. I've had a conversation with our SI co-coordinators, Olga Grau and Olivia Hendricks, and their intent is to have sessions with native speakers so our students can keep their practice up. From Bridget, it would be helpful when introducing a new concept if the teachers could prepare a mini video lesson that could be watched at any time to help working parents. I agree. I think you're going to find part of the repertoire that our teachers will be doing will be creating screencasts. If any of you had the opportunity, very similar to what I've done over these last couple weeks in creating something that's relatively short, 5 to 10 minutes, you know, present on with Google Slides, with video, just kind of explaining concepts. Hi, Alyssa. You're now no longer just Mrs. Krager. I'm glad to get rid of that formality. If school is canceled longer, will there be an adjustment to this plan, or will this plan continue moving forward? I think, again, flexibility, adaptability, we are going to adapt as we need it. Also, what support will be provided to all students that have holes in new content due to remote learning circumstances when school reopens? Great questions, Alyssa. Are you a teacher yourself, I bet, with that Mrs. Krager name?
Yes, I am.
Okay, figures. But what we're doing, what we have built in for our teachers is planning time. And we've got grade level, departmental, and interdisciplinary team planning time because we're fully cognizant that in the unfortunate chance that this is the way that we end the school year, what we're going to have is a situation when our kids come back to it in September, there's definitely going to be gaps. So I think we might be looking at a situation where, you know, the first term, the first trimester is going to have to involve remediation, some type of ramp up. We're really going to have to look at our curriculum very, very carefully, but that's the planning. Okay, Dave Quinn puts in a reminder to everybody regarding some of the resources with regard to Zoom to ensure that everybody's safe. Thank you. Kate, good morning, Kate. For kids whose grades were improving in term 3, will there be any consideration in using this for their final grade, or will it just be terms 1 and 2? At this point, it is, we are going to handle just terms 1 and 2 discreetly. Then from Cormac again, so based upon Mrs. Moran and Mr. Clement's explanations, a junior will be reporting the GPA that they had as of early March on their fall college applications next year. That is because pass-fail doesn't count. Their GPA is basically frozen in time. That is accurate.
Yeah, Joe, just to jump in on that, if you don't mind, it's a really good question and one that we've been talking about with other administrators as well. Great to have Mike Rubin in the chat. We've been working on this with our league principals as well as across the state. Just to keep in mind that this is essentially going to be the position for all high school students across the Commonwealth. And, you know, one of our league schools recently called their top 25 college acceptances from last year to inquire about transcripts in GPA. All of them recognize that they're going to be looking differently. And I think that's not only here in Massachusetts, but that's going to be nationwide with so many schools that are not only out through till early May, but out potentially for the entire year. So we recognize that our kids are going to have a different looking transcript, but they are joining that cohort of juniors and seniors across the nation who are going to have that different kind of looking transcript.
Thank you, John. From Michelle, seeing all of the concerns regarding our high school juniors, would it make sense for students with strong grades from term 3 so far to capture what their grade is now to work into a supplemental info given to colleges and keep a portfolio of work to show exemplary work moving forward and maybe worked into recommendations letters? Oh my God, Michelle, you must be an educator yourself. That seriously, that is a terrific idea. And I don't know, John or Marianne, if you want to talk a little bit about this. we're in the process now of thinking of other creative solutions. You know, one of the things that's been bandied about and is also kind of being kicked around on a national basis is looking at something like a capstone project, to really kind of capture exemplary work that has been done. And I don't know, John or Marianne, if you want to talk a little bit about it and so on, but we are looking into creative solutions like that.
Sure. I mean, I'd just jump in and say that this goes aligned with what we've been really focused on as a school community, and recognizing that our students a lot more than their grades, focusing a lot on the development of the portrait of the learner and the skills that our kids need for success, not only in school, but in the world beyond school. We know that their grades are an important part of that, and that's a door opening achievement for our kids. We certainly don't minimize it, but I think the suggestion about looking for ways to round out a portfolio of their work, highlight their successes, tell the story of perseverance and achievement through this challenging time, those are going to be the kinds of stories that resonate not only with us as educators and parents and community members, but with college admissions offices.
Okay. For Megan, I received the new schedule for my fourth grade teacher already. Am I to assume that's the same school schedule for my first grader, or I will receive one from her teacher on Monday? What I would do, Megan, is reach out to your two teachers. We've kept things very flexible and open at the elementary level for the simple reason that, you know, the elementary teachers, for the most part, just have their classroom. So we're giving them flexibility. So if there's a question, I would say reach out to your teacher. From Heather, will the shutdown help our budget for the next year? For example, since we are not busing at the moment, our transportation costs being adjusted for this time period. Okay, so I'm going to go with the easy question, the second one. We are saving a little bit of money with regard to transportation. We still are in a contract, however, those services are not being delivered, so we are not paying on that. However, we're looking at some guidance that we receive from the state. So Heather, I'm going to be real frank with you, and I'm going to be real frank with everybody that is in this chat. This shutdown is not helping our budget. You know, to be real frank with everybody, you see what's happening economically. Right now, the FY21 budget, the budget for next school year, is being rewritten in our legislature. If you just look at the Boston Globe or do a search, the projections for revenue, state revenue, are going to be dramatically lower because of the shutdown. So I've got concerns about state aid, but I also, for those of you who've been following it, we've put in an override request to maintain our budget, essentially. And I've got concerns about that, of, you know, what's going to happen within our communities and so on. So I would say, please stay posted. We have a school committee meeting this coming Monday, again through Zoom, in which we'll be discussing this issue, but I've got some grave concerns. We have a question from Devin. Do you know what the status is for MCAT testing this year if school closure ends up being the rest of the year? Yeah, I think for the most part, it's completely done. There's no MCAT testing whatsoever. There's really two things that needed to happen. The feds needed to issue a waiver, which they have done. And our commissioner, Jeff Riley, has applied for it. And the legislature has to vote to put a moratorium on MCAS. And I think in all likelihood that will happen. So I think it's a very safe bet that there will be no MCAS. From Joanna, are there any plans to consolidate online learning tools, especially for elementary students? Our kindergarten has 9 websites or apps to log into, and our third grader has 12, much more than our middle school students. I would respectfully ask if for those kind of specific things, please touch base with either Mrs. Gallagher or Mrs. Swain, whoever your child is, if they're at Clough Memorial, to talk about how potentially could be streamlined. From Jennifer, can you please just clarify if I understand correctly that the elementary level teachers will be teaching new content? That is correct, that it is the expectation across the district that we will be covering new content. Beth, April vacation be honored, or will this be considered a working week? I think I covered that. We will be keeping it. From Mike again, from my daughter, will the content of the SATs be adjusted to the units that we're able to cover before the shutdown? That's what they did for the APs, and it seems very difficult to learn new content well enough to be tested. Again, Mike, I would visit the College Board. I would think that there will be some type of adjustment to the testing, but also some type of adjustment in the standard and norm setting when they have the scoring and the calibration. Again, from Alyssa, if our family falls ill and a child struggles with remote learning work submission, will this impact credit, no credit? Again, Alyssa, and to everybody else listening, it's about flexibility. You know, we're not trying to establish a system that is heavy-handed, that is onerous, and so on. I know I speak for our educators in saying we want to be flexible and we want to work with everybody. And we know that there's going to be situations where people get sick or people have a family member that gets sick and there's a lot of stress and so on. So again, we will work with you. And again, I guess I go back to these are extraordinary times. This is a crisis that probably for a lot of us is one of the most significant crises that we'll live through, okay? We're trying to develop a system where we can maintain a modicum of normalcy, and we can do the best that we can to provide some sort of education and services for your children. And that's the bottom line. From Michelle again, have you designated online times for each grade level? No, we have not, but the feeling is that we're asking our administration at the elementary level to kind of keep a Google sheet to ensure that there isn't conflicts across grade levels of face-to-face sessions. Beth says that it would be a disservice from the kids to take vacation break. I understand that point of view. However, it's something that I've given a lot of thought to, and the counter viewpoint is around the work and some of the effort and some of the stresses of moving to strictly an online environment. You've heard the simple fact that moving to an online environment, it can be stressful. And for those of you who are working from home, I think it's a different kind of fatigue. And having that break would probably be very, very well served. From Michelle, seeing your slide with the senior walkthrough pulled at my heart. Are there any plans to offer social opportunities for kids since they really used to feel connected from their peers? Also, is there a plan to recreate or offer after the fact traditions, rites of passage for kids, particularly for 5th, 8th, and 12th graders when the crisis ends. That's a great point. I think we're going to try to offer some creative virtual experiences for our kids while we're still in this space. But again, I've said this before, you have my commitment as leader of this district. We will find the time and the space to appropriately recognize our kids, to appropriately honor and celebrate, particularly the milestones, things like graduation and 8th grade graduation and so on. I can't give specific answers to that, but but as soon as the social distancing requirements fade and we see the end is near, we will do our absolute best to answer, to plan these. Again, okay, so there's a question from iPhone. I heard you respond to a few comments about factoring in third term grades. I'm not understanding why those grades are not included. You are extending the term to allow for those kids failing, but it is a disservice to those students who worked really hard in this term, in which the majority was completed. This is very much a concern and seems very unfair for the kids who have worked hard, seems unbalanced. John, do you want to say anything? Or?
Yeah, would you like us to share our screen? We can kind of refer to the FAQ sheet. That might be helpful to kind of see the thought process we had in putting this together. So I'm just going to share my screen for a moment, everyone. We know this is a question on everyone's mind, and it's something we've been focusing a lot of time and energy on. And so we want to be as clear as possible. Mrs. Moran, you can jump in at any point too.
Sure.
So we also have these FAQs out on our blog. So that's nipmucprinciples.com. You can check those out. So there are several reasons we're looking to go pass fail at this point. And so just to outline them. Number one, students haven't had a fair opportunity to improve grades before the unexpected closure. So I want you to put yourself on the standpoint of a student who is 65, 66% of the way through the term and knows they've got to get working and get busy with their grades and their assignments in order to get their grade where they want it to be. And then all of a sudden to have that opportunity change, the game change, and say, nope, we're not going to give you that opportunity. And sorry, but we're going to take the current grade that you have now. I realize there is the other side of that coin, and that there are kids who have been working diligently in a dedicated way and working hard the entire term, and their grades are high, and I don't discredit that. And, we appreciate that so much. We've got a school full of these kiddos who are, really impressive in their work ethic and their future focused. So we have that in our mind as we make this decision. We want to keep in mind too, kids who were sick or absent prior to the closure, they haven't had a chance to complete the assignments or assessments. So that could be to their betterment because they were ready and they were all set to go, and then they got sick, or a family member got sick and they needed to be home. But it also could be that they didn't take the most challenging test of the year and all their classmates did. And now they're not having an equitable representation of their grade. The rhythm of high school life, bullet number 3, is that at the end of the term, things pick up. The pace picks up. And our kids will tell you this. They are busiest right before the term ends, and that they have tests and quizzes and presentations and projects. Many of those are the assessments that are weighted more heavily as part of their grade. Those didn't have a chance to take place. And so we're looking at not only 65, 66% of the term completed, but it also is absent of some of the most important assessments that the kids would take over the course of the year. And then the next 2 points are important here. We're looking at the DESE recommendations, and the commissioner is recommending don't grade, go pass fail. And so for us to go against that recommendation, recognizing that there are kids in these first 3 who are impacted by these first 3 bullets who haven't had a fair shake, and then to also go against the Department of Education recommendation doesn't feel like a fair, equitable, or a wise decision. We look too at the fact that we had an initial 3-week absence, leaving on March 13th, was initially scheduled for 2 weeks, extended to 1 more week. That's 3 weeks worth of work that was not graded, not included. And we felt like we needed to give everybody the chance, a fair chance to work on term 3 averages, which is why we're extending that to April 17th. But with part of the term being graded and part of the term being pass fail, becomes very challenging to now come up with a mathematical equation where you're going to say, okay, well, we'll come up with a magic grade value for the pass fail work and average that in with the first part of the term. For the students, we want to honor the students, and we heard, as I said before, in such respectful, comprehensive, clear leadership emails to us, reaching out to us to be sure that we're considering everybody. We've heard kids say, Mr. Clements and Mrs. Moran, I am working so hard. Please don't undervalue the work that I've put in. Can you just count my average in GPA? Or could you take my score and give me an extra term? We had a recommendation for a term 5, or allow me to replace term 2 with my term 3 average. They're getting creative, and I appreciate it. At the same time, it's got to be an equitable decision for all. When you make decisions about grades, you can't have different criteria for different kids because you're judging everybody in a uniform system. I want you to know that we have been really laboring over this one, and not only looking within our community and listening to kids and parents, but looking outside at other districts. I know Uxbridge came up, and Uxbridge was literally 1 week away from the end of their term. Being 1 week away is a lot different for us than being at the 65% complete point. And so that's why we're at the decision that we're at. But I can't say enough how much we appreciate the work of the students, and we appreciate the voice of students and parents who are saying, please do not undervalue the hard work, dedication, and commitment I put in to earn that hard grade. And don't discredit the fact that I worked hard from day 1 of the term to the 65% point before we had to close. Mrs. Moran, I know, is mentioning a lot. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I would just echo that. We understand that there's going to be students that are disappointed or feel like their hard work doesn't matter. And, you know, it's our job to kind of take into consideration all sides. So there's students on the other side too that I'm sure who are really upset, you know, and are in the failing range and haven't had the opportunity. So we appreciate everyone trying to see both sides of that coin. And we're still working with school counselors and with Power School and on our transcript and how best to represent numerical grades and pass-fail grades and communicate that to colleges and universities. So that's our priority list as well, to figure those pieces out for our students so that we're giving the best representation of our students to colleges and universities, knowing that our freshmen are impacted just the same. They will have a semester of their transcript that looks different, but colleges and universities are expecting that. They know that this is going to play out for the next 4 years on kids' college, on their high school transcripts.
Great. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. From Leanne, great to hear these thoughts about flexibility for the kids. Are students hearing these thoughts as well as to help them relax and not stress? That's a great point. And I think it's incumbent upon myself as superintendent, our building principals, but also our staff in general to be on the same page with communicating. And again, I think there's a real variety of households and household perspectives, and particularly at the secondary level. And, you know, some of the questions and comments about the college application process and some of our high flyers and the stress that they feel and so on. I think we have to keep getting that message across that it is about the connections. It's about keeping learning current, but we cannot have the same expectations that we would in a typical school year. From Jennifer, again, is there a plan for the district to offer technology to students again? The prior plan did not require my children to be on the computer at the same time. This one does. I am on my personal laptop for work all day. It doesn't seem reasonable to expect children to begin schoolwork at 4 or 5 when my device is available. You know, I think we can do another reach out. And again, that could be part of the surveying process. We have, in that initial all call to parents, we disseminated approximately 30 to 35 devices. We've also disseminated, or in the process of disseminating, some mobile hotspots. We have a few families in our community that did not have high-speed internet. Again, I think we can survey again, and we want to work with our families. From Anonymous, hello Anonymous. What is your perspective on ancillary programs like the before and after school program? We're not getting this service, and many of the staff are high school students that live at home. Also, there's no overhead right now. Many are not charging and so on. We will not be sending out bills for the before or after school program, plain and simple, for the simple reason that, again, like you say, Mr. or Mrs. Anonymous, the service is not being provided. From Jeff. Hi, Jeff. Is there a plan to continue these sessions? Very informative and a great opportunity for parents to raise questions or concerns. I will continue doing these, probably on Saturday mornings. Probably works best for most people and works fine for me. So I will, I don't know the exact schedule, but probably at a minimum every 2 weeks. From Tracy, for the children with IEPs or learning disabilities that may fall behind without additional support, will anything be offered during the summer or by tutoring to catch them up moving to the next grade? Yes, as I said in my presentation, I do think some of our services can be delivered virtually, but I think there's going to be cases where we can't, and we will offer additional services. From Diane, a very nice thank you. I appreciate it, Diane. Much love to the Duncan household. I hope you guys are doing fine and you're not driving each other crazy. Is anybody going crazy right now? And then from Alexis, it's obvious that the term 3 grades is a big concern for students. Is it possible to take the discussion offline and try to come up with a creative solution? I will leave that up to John and Marianne, and I know that they will reach out to parents and they will have multiple forums. I know they've done some terrific work in engaging students and having student meetings and so on. I'm sure you know, they've come up with policy that they think is sound, that takes into account all learners. But however, I'm sure they are more than willing to have dialogue with all stakeholders. From Stephanie, we appreciate all the work that the admin and staff are doing to figure this out. It's a learning curve and we all have to be flexible. Thank you, Stephanie. I really appreciate that comment. I really do. This is super hard work. All of the stressors that we know that you're experiencing as parents are super, super tough. We get it. Realize as parents ourselves, all of our educators in the district, it's the same boat. And again, I go back to this is highly, highly imperfect, our plan, but we're trying to be flexible. And again, we will adapt as needed. Again, Beth, last comment about April vacation. You sure about that, Beth? Any chance that we could spread out the days off and just have a 4-day school week, for example, take Wednesday off to have a break in a week? I think we're going to honor that week. And again, it's got implications for the calendar. I would invite you, Beth. I will send out the Zoom, but it is one of our discussion topics at the school committee meeting this coming Monday evening. From Stephanie again, at least at the elementary level, it might be good if the kids had a project to do over April vacation week, like a picture or a journal. Okay, this way the learning can continue, but we get a break too. You mean you need a break, parents? Okay, great idea. From Alana, my friend Alana, big thank you to the teachers and administration. This is a difficult situation. Thank you, Alana. I really appreciate that feedback. From Heather. Hi, Heather. How are you? Any suggestions for learning and bridging the learning gap over the summer months for students so that there isn't that much of a gap? That's a great idea, Heather. I am certain we will be issuing further guidance, and again, we'll do more of these Zoom sessions and so on. Bruce, hello, Bruce. How are you, my friend? As a faculty member, we are very appreciative for the community support. Thanks to you all. Bruce, thank you. I appreciate that. And I know, Bruce, you represent the voice of many, many teachers across our district. And then Beth, I promise no more questions. I really do appreciate #StayFlexible. Thank you, Beth. And again, another thank you from Heather. Really, really appreciate it. And again, thank you, Alyssa, again. So I think we're at about, almost, let's see, I can still do math, 80 minutes of this. This has been long. I will continue to do these. I will still torture you with emails and text messages and app alerts. If you don't have our district app, go to either the iPhone or the Android app store, and search Mendon-Upton, and you can download our app. It's just yet another way that we can communicate. If you don't already, follow me on Facebook or follow me on Twitter. Twitter is just search Joseph Maruszczak or @JPM_MURSD. I post everything that I send out and so on. So I'm going to conclude this. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful Saturday. I appreciate everything that you guys are doing in your homes with your kids. We know that this is super challenging. And, you know, we're in this together and we're going to get through this together. So again, I'm now going to stop the recording. Somebody just asked, is this recorded? Yes, this is recorded. I'm going to be sending this out. I'm also going to be posting it on social media, and you can watch it, all 80 minutes of it, at your own leisure. Okay, have a great Saturday. I'll see you guys, at least virtually, really soon. Take care.